Hello, I'm Chrissy Seaton. Recently I've become quite alarmed about the increase of confusion amongst Noahide individuals and communities, and I've given it a lot of thought, and I would like to speak a little bit about that today, and perhaps hopefully that will allay some confusion or anxiety that some of you may have. If you can hear a sound in the background, incidentally, it's our kookaburras outside in the garden warbling away. Beautiful. So why is there this confusion, and why does that happen to some people in some groups, etc.? Well, I'm going to try and explain a little bit. Now, look, I have made myself some detailed notes here because I realise that I want to be very clear about what I'm saying. So I'm going to, there goes the dogs now barking at the kookaburras. I want to be very clear so that I don't add to your confusion. So if I appear to be reading from notes, I am at times, okay? So some practices that communities and individuals have been taught are what we would call extreme, and some are very minimal. So why does that happen? Well, in my opinion, and from listening to other Noahides and teachers also, it would depend on who you are actually learning from. Who is your actual teacher? And what is their background or their interpretation of the Noahide laws and associated teachings with that? Now, with the minimal teachings, and this is available on the internet, there's writings about it, etc., or your local rabbi may be teaching you. I'm sure that happens in a lot of areas as well. But what happens with the teachings is you get a minimal, brief guideline, the very basics about the 7 Noahide laws, some minimal instruction on how to perhaps employ that in your life. Then you will get a conservative teaching, which is sort of middle of the road, as I call it, and that will give you your basics as well as a degree of explanation and detail about certain things you can or can't do. And then the other end of the scale is the very extreme. And these are borderlining, these extreme practices and teachings are bordering on the making of a new religion, or they're already over that border and they are creating a new religion. So I'm going to speak from the point of view of the conservative, middle of the pathway teachings that I personally recommend. It's just my personal recommendations, but it may explain along the way some things that are confusing others. Now, why do I follow this path? Well, first of all, in this teaching, I learn the common sense basics. So I get the basic 7 Noahide laws, what they are, and the common sense approach to those things. Then number 2, I avoid pitfalls and false teaching. I might hear about it, but I understand it not to be correct or for me. And then also number 3, the details and the explanations broaden your understanding, broaden that fundamental understanding of what the Noahide laws are and what is expected of us as a Noahide. So I'm going to use an example here today just because it's a common thing that it comes up in discussion and in differences of opinions with certain Noahide teachers and some Noahide people. So the example I'm going to use is the seventh day, or the Sabbath, the Jewish Sabbath. Now, that was a commandment given to the Jews. It was not given to the rest of the world. So let's make that clear now. Now, this seventh day observance comes up in discussion quite often, and there's varying opinions about what a Noahide can or can't do. Now, the minimal teaching is there is no observance. Noahides do not have the commandment to observe the seventh day, or the Jewish Sabbath as we know it. So we can work, we can drive, we can do whatever we like. There's no requirement for us whatsoever to observe the seventh day. That's the minimal. The extreme, we have people who are either being taught or they're following the observance of the Sabbath. So that means that they're pretty much following it or observing it as a religious Jew would, with maybe one or two few exceptions. But they're turning it into a ritual that they are embracing. Now, the conservative view is, of course, it is not, it's like the minimal view, it is not required. We are not commanded by God to do this under, there's no hint of it anywhere for a Noahide to have to do this. So, but we can have, it's a Saturday. A lot of people in the Western world work 5 weekdays and have a weekend off, for example, but there's nothing stopping us from having a nice family meal or with friends, lighting a candle, setting the meal table up nicely, and having a gathering amongst people, as we would perhaps to celebrate a birthday in the family or some particular happy occasion. So we can do that. That's not an issue. We might even say the blessing over the food, as would be a nice idea. So I'm going to illustrate this further, again, in the hope that I don't increase your level of confusion. I'm going to give you an example of what we do, our family, and just to give you an idea. So while we certainly are not practicing the Sabbath as the Jews do, we sometimes have an opportunity on that day or the weekend to have a family meal and some friends and some nice times, happiness, celebration. So my family and I, we live on our family farm, so there's no day off for farmers, so that's not a problem. We'll never be accused of observing the Sabbath, because if you've got animals, you're going to have things you have to do every day regardless. But because two of my sons work also at another job other than the farm, so very often Friday evening or Saturday and sometimes Sunday, that's when visitors will pop in, or other friends, or all the families available. And I have one son in particular who considers himself to be rather a bush chef, and a very good one. And so he always cooks up a beautiful meal. Now that could be Friday night, because everyone turns up then, impromptu. Or it might be Saturday lunchtime, or Saturday night, or it could be Sunday lunchtime. There's no particular routine day, but rest assured it is a rare weekend when we do not have people visiting and we have a meal, we have laughter, we have conversation, there's children running around. So it's a lovely time, but we're not observing the Sabbath. It just happens to be maybe sometimes on a Friday evening or during the Saturday. But I sometimes, we have a big shed on our farm, and part of it's concreted, so we have sort of a bush kitchen there. And it's affectionately sometimes called Abraham's shed, because that's where we eat when people come. It's a big area, there's plenty of cooking area, seating area, etc., like that. So it's sometimes likened to Abraham's tent. So, but it's hospitality, it's kindness, helping others. Somebody may say they've got a bit of fencing they need to finish off, so the men will say, oh, look, we can do that on such and such a day. So it's a community, a small community gathering, whereby sometimes it's on a Friday or a Saturday, but the emphasis is on our local community and that friendship and that connection with our local community, some of which my sons have gone to school with. So they've been lifelong friends. So that is just an example of what we do. So what is conservative teaching? Well, conservative teaching will usually have guidelines that, first of all, there'll be the common sense guidelines, things that we think, well, are morally correct. For instance, we're not commanded to honour our parents, but our parents gave us life. I mean, it's common sense we would respect them and honour them. It's an obligation that we have as their child. So that's one explanation. The next thing is that the conservative teachings will show you the middle road. So you're not going to go to this minimal, bare bones, just the 7 laws, that's it, no further enlightenment, and or to the other extreme where you could be on the verge of creating a new religion. The conservative teachings, I should say, I recommend, because you get to see what you get to understand the basics, you get to understand what you are commanded to do, what you might be obliged to do, as in honouring your parents, and to avoid the pitfalls of creating a new religion. Now, there are some Noahides that are practicing keeping the Sabbath to the full extreme, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. And they've been taught that, or in their opinion, they think that is the correct thing to do. Well, in actual fact, we are forbidden. We are forbidden to take upon that Sabbath practice. It is not part of our commandments. And for us as Noahides to adopt that practice is like thieving from the Jews. It's called making a new religion. So let me make that clear. While we can sit down and have a family meal on a Friday night or a Saturday or whatever, and light a candle and say a blessing over the food and say, well, we hope our Jewish brothers and sisters have a blessed Sabbath, blah, blah, blah. But we can't celebrate it to the extent that has been commanded to the Jewish people. That is incorrect, it is forbidden, it is wrong, it is thieving from the Jews. My recommendation for people who remain in an area of confusion over what and who they should learn from, or if they've got concerns about who they're learning from or who's teaching them, I suggested this many times to people. I say, get hold of a copy of the Divine Code. It's written by Rabbi Moshe Weiner, foremost authority on matters pertaining to the Noahide laws. An extremely good book. I suggest buy a copy. If you go to my website, you will see a link where you can go to purchase a copy of this. Now, this is recommended by me because there is detail within it. And some people would say there's too much detail. But my answer to that is I'm better to know all the details and the pitfalls so that I can avoid a mistake and I don't become confused. So, for instance, in here it talks about um, the prohibition against making a new religion or adding to it. And there's detailed explanations. Now, another thing which is interesting, and I'll just use this as an example, at the moment I've been looking into the laws surrounding the prohibition of eating meat taken from a still living animal. And to a lot of us, we think, well, common sense, who in their right mind would do that? And you're right, of course, it's a disgusting thought. But that is how much of detail, etc. See that bit there? That's how many pages there are about laws pertaining to animals. So it's not just about the snatching of a limb from a living animal. It also talks about animal welfare, kindness, it talks about nature, it talks about a lot of things in here, too numerous for me to mention in this video. But what it does do is that at the bottom of the page, it always has some explanations. For instance, down here, it's got explanations regarding things that have been set up there, detail, etc., where to find another explanation, or if there's been a differing opinion about what is written there. Now, that is very heavy detail, but to me, I would rather have that detail. I may never need it. I may never need to be involved with what is happening there, but it's there. I have got no excuse for saying I don't know what you would do about it. I mightn't remember it all. As you can see, my copy's fairly dog-eared. I have to come back to it every now and then on finer points if a question is put to me, etc. So that is my recommendation. Out of all the books and things that I have seen available and read, this to me is the most conservative, factual, and helpful reading and teaching I have had. I've met Rabbi Moshe Weiner several times. He is an exceptional scholar, and I can't recommend this enough, that book. So, to sum it all up, we have this need to have someone who is teaching us what the minimum is, what the extremes are to avoid, and what the conservative middle of the road teachings are. And as long as you are following the 7 Noahide commandments, that is enough. But you sometimes might want to understand why and what more information about that. So you need a teacher, you need someone who can answer your questions, or some sort of a guideline if you are a Noahide and you don't belong to a community, you are a person living in an isolated area. You need to have something that you can refer to. So it's a textbook, it's a reference. So, and within that book, you will find things that are acceptable that we can do, and you will see pitfalls that we should avoid, and they are things that are sometimes actually forbidden. So yes, it is detailed, but I would say it leaves no area for confusion about the Noahide commandments in a community setting, and for a Noahide who is living alone without any actual community support. So that is my recommendation. I understand this will not appeal to everyone, but it is the best place to start. Is you need to have a conservative basis, and you need to be aware of what is acceptable and what is actually forbidden practice, some of which is bordering on either creating a new religion or they already have created a new religion. I sincerely hope that this has helped and explained things a little better to you. Don't forget to go to the website www.mynoahidefamily.com, and please I hope that I have cleared your mind of some concerns that you might have. I care very much about Noahides throughout the world, and I care that they are learning correctly and that they're not left floundering. Subscribe to my channel, ask a question, leave a comment. God bless you all. Bye.